So today it's Tuesday, 2024, and this is my final video in connection with the People's National Congress's Biennial Congress, where they had elections to vote in party members to various positions. The bulk of this video will consist of an interview this morning on Mr. Bobby VIERA's radio program within the newly re-elected, I should say, PNC leader Aubrey Compton Norton. I'm making this video primarily for my senior citizen subscribers who subscribe to my channel. There were 2,000 delegates for this election, but apparently only about 1,066 delegates voted. Mr. Norton got about 1,040 something delegates. But one of the things that I have noted is they put out probably a brief manifesto, like a front page manifesto for next year's elections. I am looking at it on my laptop screen right now. I'll read out some of it quickly. Manifesto promises for 2025, big increases in salaries and pensions in our first 100 days in government, monthly rent assistance for low-income households, free tertiary education and a loan write-off for students, and of course, it also has student stipends, childcare allowance for newborn and toddlers, rent-to-own housing and mortgage assistance, ban on income tax for low to middle wage earners in our first 100 days in government. Billions of dollars to be spent in grants and soft loans for small businesses, cheap water and electricity, and 2 hot school meals per day. So also I was reading on Demraways website, Roy Johnson's article. Roy Johnson is a writer, journalist. He is saying that the PNC under former President David Grenville was hijacked by the middle class, and this is a chance now for Aubrey Norton to put the PNC back into grassroots mode. But the thing of it, I have friends in the PNC, and they were telling me the former Minister Joe Harmon, that was the guy who had close links to the business community, and through Joe Harmon, the PNC was able to get a lot of money from businesses. But without Joe Harmon there, that's the problem. The business people apparently don't trust Mr. Norton. And we all know to run in elections, you have to have money coming in. Anyhow, let me leave this video with you. Enjoy.
St. George, if there are any delegates or any group that have not collected their cards as yet, could you please come to the front? Could you please come to the front? Group St. Georgetown, if there's any delegate that have not collected your cards yet, could you please come to the front?
This is MERVYN Williams from Congress Place to Fire, headquarters of the People's National Congress Reform. This is Special Edition Nation Watch. It's Election Day, PNCR 22nd Biennial Congress 22nd Biennial Delegates Congress. We're coming to you from Sapphire, headquarters of the People's National Congress Reform. Voting is currently ongoing. I spoke with Mr. Vincent Alexander, the returning officer, earlier. He estimates that this will go well and that by 4 o'clock we will be able to close the proceedings. The process is going very smoothly. There is a bit of a snag in the polling booth where persons are required to vote for 15 members of the Central Executive Committee of the party from somewhere in the region of 60 nominees. That is presenting a bit of a challenge. The process is a little bit slow in that regard. We're out here and behind me you can see the line. This is outside. This is outside of the building. Persons are well all queued up here to exercise their vote. And if you follow me inside, this is where the line is on the outside of the building. This is inside the auditorium. We're inside the auditorium. Here is where the bulk of the voting delegates are currently located. They have to walk all across the end over into the other building to vote. And across that way you can see a big screen. That screen displays the voting process inside the polling area so that persons out here in the auditorium can see everything that's happening in there except what's happening in the polling booth itself. So the process is open, it is transparent, and people are cooperating with the process, which is taking a little bit of time, but we have until 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, the last person in line at 4 o'clock will be the last person to vote. This is where we are. This is Congress Place to Fire. This is where the action is. This is where democracy is at work. This is where an open, transparent process of electing leaders of the most democratic political party in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is happening. It's all happening at Congress Place to Fire. We will be back with you again a little bit later on, but just to let you know that there are about 2,000 delegates who will be exercising their vote today to elect leaders of the People's National Congress Reform. So the process is smooth, the process is open, it is transparent, and it accommodates at least 2,000 voting delegates. We're here at Sapphire, and everyone who is here to participate in the process is happy to be part of this process. And to recap what we discussed earlier this morning, the two nominees for the position of leader, Ms. Walton Desir and Mr. Roysdale Ford, have formally withdrawn from the race for leader, leaving AUBREY Compton Norton, the incumbent, as the sole nominee standing for the position of leader of the People's National Congress Reform. Mr. Norton is leader of the opposition and enjoys tremendous support here at Congress Place. So we are with the process, and we will be back with you for another update in a few minutes. You will be kept up to date. This is MERVYN Williams, a special edition of Nation Watch from Congress Place to Fire, headquarters of the People's National Congress Reform.
I'm pleased to announce that after a full day of balloting, which started at 10 a.m., concluded at 4 p.m., meaning that those who were in the line at 4 p.m. were allowed to cast their vote. The process, which concluded approximately at 7 p.m., the ballots have been counted for 4 of the 5 contested positions. Those 4 are leader, chairperson, vice chairpersons, in fact 2 vice chairpersons, and the treasurer. The electoral roll was approximately 1,300 persons, and the results are as follows. For leader, an uncontested position with 1,040 votes out of 1,040 votes out of 1,066 votes cast. I repeat, for the leader, 1,040 votes out of 1,066 votes cast. For the chairman, and that person, the leader, is Honorable Aubrey Norton, MP. For chairperson, out of 976 votes cast, Sherwin Holder has emerged with 844 of those 976 votes. For the treasurer, Elson Lowe has emerged with 978 votes out of 1,061 votes cast. Vice chairpersons, we have emerging Elizabeth Williams Niles with 669 and Fitzroy Jordan with 663. We're still in the process of counting the votes for the members of the Central Executive. There were 60 contestants for 15 positions, and so that count has been prolonged and will be made at the appropriate time. But I repeat, the emergent situation is that Aubrey Norton has been elected unopposed, leader of the People's National Congress Reform. Sherwin Holder has been elected unopposed, chairman of the People's National Congress Reform. Elizabeth William Niles, and Fitzroy Jordan in a contest of 5 have emerged as the 2 vice chairpersons, and Mr. Elson Lowe, uncontested, has emerged as the treasurer. The announcement for the CEC, Central Executive Committee, will be made once that count is concluded in the new day. Thank you.
And in a few lashes, the world has changed. You need more professional people to deal with children, and so we intend to look at that core. Also, we believe that in our vision, this society must be safe, and therefore we will put significant emphasis on improving the police capacity to enforce law and order. We believe that if you train policemen so that they can solve crime, then that in itself will serve as a deterrent to those who want to be involved in crime. We also think that this question of creating a safe society will also have to deal with corruption, because corruption is one of the biggest problems facing our society. And I've said to those who I'm working with, who are likely to become ministers, senior government officials, that they have to come to serve. If you come just to make money, stay inside the private sector. The people who come to politics must be people who come to serve, and there's no conflict of interest. That, I think, also is part of the new political culture we're looking at. We also believe that young people are critical. And what we said, and I said it in my speech to the Congress, that we'll develop a 50-50 program where we take 50,000 young people, give them a stipend of $50,000, but in the process, they have to go into institutions that we will create, etc., and improve their skill set so that they can be employed in the society. It's not just a case of giving a cash grant. It's given a cash grant with clear objectives so that people don't become mendicants. They see themselves as people who have been deprived, but now that there are opportunities, they will utilize them and improve themselves. So a lot of our vision is focused on human resource development.
Quite an expansive vision indeed, and I must compliment it. But let me go back to the PNC as we are on the PNC, and then we're going to come a little down towards governance. Obvious Congress was a period for discussing party issues, but the most highlighted part of Congress, obvious, is elections. And you had some challenges, leading up to the leadership and the election of a leader. There were two persons who eventually dropped out of the race for reasons one way or the other. Now that Congress is over, you have been elected or re-elected leader. How do you plan to engage those persons, if you do at all?
Well, there must be engagement. I consider the PNC to be a party that involves everyone. What I do believe, and from my own studies of conflict resolution, one has to handle conflicts in a particular way. In this case, I believe an interlocutor will be better. So what I intend to do is to have particular persons engage the persons we are talking about, discuss with them, and then we can meet and decide how we move forward. I'm very open. I'm very clear in my mind that all of them have skills that we need, and that we need to include all the skill sets that exist. I've said to Congress, one of the discussions we had at Congress is about the role of social media in present day politics. Before, it wasn't a case where anybody could have put anything on social media, and so that becomes like, if it is a truth, even if it's a lie. And so we have in the Congress discussed how we use social media to ensure that it is positive and redound to the benefit of the People's National Congress reform and Guyana generally. And we intend to engage those persons with the aim of resolving the problems and moving forward as a political party. We believe that the conditions are ripe for us to take government, since the People's Progressive Party is not operating in the interest of the people. It's alienating many of its supporters, and therefore we will do the work and be very inclusive moving forward.
You talked about social media and the importance of social media in politics. And it is no secret that the results of the elections have now appeared on social media. And missing from those results are persons who were very integral in the PNC and its hierarchy, vis-a-vis Christopher Jones and others. Now, this is on social media. How do you plan to work with those people going forward, since maybe it may not be you, but it was an election and people were elected? So how do you plan going forward with making those people feel that they still have a role to play?
Let me correct something that you just said. As far as I know, they finished counting the 50. They had locked them away. They had the principal officers. They went into the morning. So I don't know if Christopher Jones will be elected or not. But whether he's elected or not, he's a long-standing member of this party. He has public relations skills, and he will be utilized. And look, there's only scope for 15 persons. And one of the things we committed ourselves to doing is to reinvigorate the party with new young people. You will recognize that in the whole process, we have been promoting young people. I'm the only old person in the 5. All the others are young people. In the 15, I know there are going to be a lot of young people. But that doesn't mean there is no place for those who are in the party and operate. And may I say this to you, you might not see a lot of people in front, but a lot of the things I'm saying and doing is after discussions with experienced people who have been in the party. I don't want to call their name. When we handle oil and gas, we have people who are professionals. We engage, we had a lot of discussion, and we arrive at the position. So there's a role for every individual in this party once the person wants to play that role.
Excellent response indeed. Now, as we move on, and I'm not even going to be bothered with time here because your presence is very essential and your responses to the questions are important. The APNU. Quite recently, the APNU had an election. They said they invited you to a meeting. They placed it on social media again, and they made its presence open to the world. And they said there was no response, and they went ahead and they had their elections. And you were, up to the elections, were the chairman of the APNU. What is your response to that move?
I am still the chairman of the APNU. The most critical political party in the APNU is the PNCR. That's the first thing.
But doesn't it, let me stop you for a second, but doesn't it give the PNCR a vote, a one vote, just like the other members of the APNU?
But you have to be invited. I was never invited.
Okay.
And mind you, I do not know that we're talking about one vote here. If you have a political movement, and one section of the movement have 90% of the votes, in the APNU, the only political party that can claim to have ever gained significant votes to form a government is the PNCR. And I believe that has to be considered. But there were a lot of things that happened that I should say that one true. One, I was never invited to meet it. Two, the PNCR, I cannot recall anybody in the PNCR who said they had an invitation. So I continue to be the chairman of the APNU. I've engaged some of the actors, and I will continue to do that. I'm meeting the WPA shortly, because one of the things we were doing is negotiating with the WPA for them to return, and they have indicated they are willing to return today. But let me say this to you, and I make no apologies for it. GAP, I'm comfortable with. NFA, I'm comfortable with. But to come and tell me somebody, people who don't have a political party, just develop a name and come in to the APNU and decide that they can manipulate it and achieve their objectives, I think they have the wrong idea. The general secretaryship has to go to a political party that exists, not two people a name on a piece of paper.
Now, so does that say, therefore, that the PNC remains a vibrant member, if not the leading member of the APNU, and there has been no separation?
The PNC continues to be chairman of the APNU.
And so there's been no separation whatsoever.
Well, I don't
in
know
your mind?
I don't know what you mean by separation.
Well, I'm talking about the meeting that they had. This is the APNU folks, and who said, you know, we've written to Mr. Norton and he didn't respond, and so we went ahead with elections. And based on your, my question is based on your response, that it was null and void, that election.
Yes, because we were not invited as a party, and others in the partnership were misled to believe that we were invited. I've spoken with those who were there, and I made it very clear that we weren't invited. That's the reality of it.
But you know, they published a letter on social media.
Well, you can publish a letter, but the letter never met me. I ran through my email, and the letter that they published, they said first it was an email, and the letter that they published wasn't an email. So I found it interesting.
All right. Interesting conversations going on, and interesting about the future of Guyana and you in general. I heard, and I think I'm right, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you were open to a consensus candidate. The Congress recently passed a motion where you, or in fact, I think if my understanding is right, anybody who became the leader should be, as the largest group in the coalition, should be the person who is selected as the presidential candidate. But in statements of recent, you said you're open to a consensus candidate. Could you elaborate on that for our viewers and listeners?
Okay. The PNC elected me overwhelmingly. The motion says that the leader of the PNC is the presidential candidate. When I say I'm open to a consensual candidate, if perchance we have to choose a candidate from the PNC, I have no problem with us having a consensual candidate. For instance, somebody like Carl Renage, if we think he is good to run and win, we have no problem with him as a consensual candidate. And so I believe that as the largest political party in the coalition, the PNCR is entitled. Which political party will have more than 90% of the support of the opposition would give its power, for the want of a better word, to 5 or 10%. It makes no sense. So when I speak of a consensual candidate, I'm speaking of a consensual candidate as it relates to the People's National Congress reform. I don't see us as a political party given to a party that has not ever in this country gotten 15% of the votes, the presidential candidate. What are we saying to our supporters? That we are supporting you for you to bring somebody else and give them leadership? We have worked and mobilized, and the hard work we would have done will have to be done to the benefit of the PNC.
So therefore, if from within the coalition, and not just the PNC, but generally the coalition, there is someone who's identified, and this is generally, if someone who's identified as being capable, would you agree? And I'm speaking now not from the PNC as you explained a moment ago, but from the coalition, because obviously you would like to keep democracy at its highest and at its best as you go forward. Are you open to someone within a structure of a party or within the structure of the coalition to come out as the viable candidate?
I am supportive of anybody coming out as a viable candidate, but there's an assumption you're making. First of all, intellectually, the PNC has people with capabilities, including myself. Some people attempt to portray the PNC as if it has no intellectual capacity. I can say this to you. I'll debate any one of them intellectually. That's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say about it is this. There are some false views of what who a presidential candidate should be. You know, I remember when we were having the presidential primaries in the PNC. Somebody said to me, oh, they couldn't support Greenwich because he's too short. Oh, he's ugly. And I'm like, hi, this thing is about competence, ability to run a country. Who cares if you're 6 feet and incompetent? Who cares if you're 6 feet good looking and you don't understand politics and you're going to be outmaneuvered? Who cares if you are 6 feet good looking, whatever, and then the first pressure that comes from the PPP, you resign and run? This question of politics, you have to have an appetite for it. And therefore, all of those talk to me, we will have to set out clear criteria on what constitutes a presidential candidate. And then there's this talk about electability. Any person with the basic competence, etc., with a proper campaign machinery, electable.
Are you prepared to have a chat with the newly elected leader of the AFC, Mr. Nigel Hughes, going forward?
I think we must. I don't see no reason why we shouldn't. I'm prepared to talk with anybody.
You know, as we get to wrapping up our great interview here this morning, Mr. Norton, there must have been things from a governmental standpoint, and you alluded to much of it in your opening remarks, but generally governance of Guyana at this point in time. What are some of the concerns that you have that you see really need paying attention to, irrespective of all the infrastructural works and all of that? Just let me bring you back to when you started. What are your thoughts?
The first thing I would say here is that one has to be free of allegations of corruption. I believe that the present leadership in the PNC cannot be accused of corruption. So, second thing I think at the governance level is we have to ensure that our constitutional bodies are independent. And we, as a political party, are prepared to ensure that our constitutional bodies are independent, the Guyana Elections Commission, among others. Then we have to use governance to deal with the ethnic issue. I've been talking about an ombudsman at the ministry level. So you put a cluster of ministries, and you have an ombudsman. So if somebody feels discriminated against, they can go to that person and ensure that they get justice. The Ethnic Relations Commission provides for some 22 things to be done. Only one is done. Basically, it's establishment. But there is scope in the law for an ethnic relations tribunal, if that can be activated. and develop independence, it can help deal with the ethnic question. And I do believe that the ethnic question is one of the critical questions we have to deal with in governance. And so we are committed to good governance, transparency, and accountability. And I do believe that we will put together a core of people who are not controlled by any company, not controlled by external interests, but people who have the interests of the people of Guyana at heart. And that is what we set out to do in terms of governance in the society. A lot of times people believe governance is government. Government and governance are two different things. Government is that machinery that operationalizes the state. Governance is your approach. Is it dictatorial? Is it democratic and believe in transparency and accountability? We opt for the latter.
Have you ever thought of engaging the government, as it were, at this time about some of the issues of your concerns when it comes to the citizens of Guyana in general?
I would say this. The most critical issue we have had since I am leading the opposition was the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. And it is well known, though I have taken a particular position on the PPP, I engaged President Ali and I engaged the government on this question to ensure that we were united against Venezuela. Unfortunately, the government will accept support as it relates to the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. But when it is related to the other issues like discrimination, etc., the government is in denial. I am disposed, but I am disposed to serious discussions. I am not one who are going to allow the president and others to take pictures just for what I call poppy show, picture opportunities. I'm going to engage if there's going to be serious discussion on how we create employment, how we get rid of discrimination, how we ensure development of our young people. I am prepared to become involved in serious developmental discussions, but I'm not up for the picture optics. The government plays a lot of optical politics. You have a set of Afro-Guyanese around them, and as if it is genuine. I'm not for that. I'm for serious engagement on the critical issues. For instance, the use of our oil resources, to me, is critical and should be discussed. You can't have a situation where the government is taking all the money out of the Natural Resource Fund and you just engage them on trivial issues. The Natural Resource Fund is a serious issue that should gain attention. We identified Terence Campbell months ago to be on the investment committee that will determine investment, etc. The government took months before they appointed him. And now that they appointed him, I don't know when the committee will meet. But those are the kind of serious issues that need to be addressed. And those I'm prepared to engage the government on. You have the questions of the REOs, where you win in a region, but the REO is appointed by the PPP, and they go against the will of the people in the region. We have that in Region 10. We have it in Region 4 and in Region 7. Those are critical issues to be addressed.
And finally, Mr. Norton, let me first of all thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be with us here this morning on Light FM, and for our viewers and our listeners around the world, and primarily here in Guyana. Before we go, I'll give you the opportunity to say anything you would like to say to the people of Guyana, from where you are, where you stand, and your vision for this country.
Well, like I've said, my vision for the country is one in which the people are the center of everything. They are benefiting, and our society is developing in a balanced way. I believe we have to work to overcome the ethnic problem, and we are going to put policies and programs in place that transcend ethnicity. And therefore, I want all Guyanese, regardless of ethnicity, to be comfortable and feel safe and sure that the next government, of which the PNC is a part or by itself, will be a government that is responsive to the concern of the people and will work assiduously to attenuate the ethnic problem. We will work assiduously to reduce poverty and ultimately eliminate it. We believe the key task before us is to eradicate poverty and put Guyana in a position where people are enjoying a high quality of life and can feel safe in Guyana. That is my vision for Guyana.
You know, that was my last question and the opportunity for you to, of course, address the people of Guyana. But someone just sent me a text and asked if Mr. Norton was considering the PNC going by itself. And I couldn't help but asking you that question so as to satisfy the listener or viewer's question.
In politics, you never say never. You have to analyze the situation, and as it emerges, you make the decisions. We are open to coalition, but we are a strong enough party that if we have to go on beyond, we can do that.
Wonderful indeed. Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and current leader of the opposition in Guyana's parliament. Thank you so much, sir, on behalf of all of us, our viewers, our listeners. Thank you, and we wish you all the best
Thanks for having me.
in the days ahead. Thank you so much indeed.